Returning from a start legislative work, one bill on the calendar today seeks to combat fraudulent asbestos claims, and the House may also consider a motion to instruct House negotiators in regards to the Farm Bill. Live coverage at the House here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in session. Prayer will be offered today by our guest chaplain, Rabbi Joshua Gruenberg, Congregation Beth El Yardley, Pennsylvania.
Our God and God of our ancestors, everlasting Spirit of the universe, may it be your will that the members of this House faithfully represent all citizens of this great nation. As they strive to govern this land, guide them, O Lord, with the pillars of humility and respect. Help them to live up to the legacy of those who have come before, and to always honor those men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice to keep this nation strong and free. Remind all citizens of our great nation to put people over politics, to elevate democracy over dogma, to value discussion over discord, and to cultivate compromise instead of convictions. Bless the members of this hallowed body with the knowledge that what binds us together is stronger than what may pull us apart, that serving you is best accomplished by serving others. Dear God, please allow your blessing of health and of peace to envelop our great nation. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
Questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The journal stands approved. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pledge of allegiance today will be led by the gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I invite everyone in the gallery to please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick, is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor and introduce a good friend and community leader in my home district, Rabbi Joshua Gruenberg, and to thank him for offering today's invocation. Rabbi Gruenberg made the trip here to the nation's capital with his wife Alyssa and his 2 children, Kayla and Samuel. I'm proud and pleased to welcome the rabbi and his family to the House of Representatives. Rabbi Gruenberg is the chief spiritual leader at Temple Beth El in Yardley, Pennsylvania. Since he joined the temple in 2011, I've gotten to know the rabbi quite well. He's participated in several of my local roundtable discussions on issues including Israel and the Middle East, and has come down to Washington to visit with me and to offer counsel. Rabbi Gruenberg is a warm and welcoming Bucks County leader. He's helped build on a strong foundation at Temple Beth El that will last for decades to come. I'm proud of the work he's done in our community and privileged to call him my friend. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The Chair lays before the House this enrolled bill. The following enrolled bill.
H.R. 2747, an act to amend Title 40, United States Code to transfer certain functions from the Government Accountability Office to the Department of Labor relating to the processing of claims for the payment of workers who were not paid appropriate wages under certain provisions of such title.
The Chair will retain. The chair will entertain 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, millions of Americans have received cancellation notices for their insurance policies as a result of Obamacare's failed legislation. The Wall Street Journal anticipates this number to reach 10 million by January 1st. Citizens living in the 2nd District of South Carolina are experiencing the brunt of the administration's deception. Becky from West Columbia is shocked. Her world-class cancer care is at risk. Frank from Lexington will be forced to buy new health insurance with higher premiums of 33%. Joe from Aiken has been notified his wife will be removed from their current health care plan January 1st, which results in a problem that now we have 2 premiums to pay, 2 deductibles to meet, and an additional thing to worry about while we're trying to raise kids and be responsible adults. These real-life problems are affecting all American families. We must stop the damage by passing the Keep Your Health Plan Act to assist families and promote jobs. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we'll never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism. Our prayers for the people of the Philippines for typhoon recovery.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Ask for consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The typhoon in the Philippines, excuse me, the typhoon in the Philippines has left a wake of unimaginable devastation. Those living in the areas hardest hit by the storm are embarking on the excruciating process of trying to pick up the pieces. Members of the San Diego region's large Filipino community are determined to send aid to their native country. They are collecting clothing and food and encouraging cash donations. The feeling of helplessness from my constituents that have family living in the area where the typhoon hit is profound. It is important that people understand where their efforts are most needed and where their donation will be best used. It is in these difficult moments like these when we witness unbridled compassion and empathy, and I'm pleased that the humanitarian efforts which our military and aid communities do so well are underway, and at least 13 other countries have joined the effort as well. But the help is not arriving as fast as those suffering from hunger, cold, illness, and homelessness need. The Filipino Americans in our districts are looking to us to continue our role as leaders in humanitarian aid. Let's continue to help those most in need.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask Ms. Scott to address the House floor for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, in recent weeks I've received far too many heartbreaking stories from the people of Missouri's 2nd District about how government-run health care is impacting their lives. Today I rise to put a face on the horrors of Obamacare and tell Jim and Kim Curtis's story, who hail from Arnold, Missouri. This is their story in their own words, and I quote, "We, the working middle class, are the ones who are being hurt by this law. We struggle every day to make ends meet. But now, because of Obamacare, we received a notice from the insurance company that the plan we currently pay for does not meet the guidelines, and we will no longer be covered on January 1st, 2014. Now we have to find an extra $500 to $600 minimum per month to cover the insurance that is comparable to what we had before. I have no idea how we will afford that kind of money and pay our bills and mortgage each month." Mr. Speaker, this is just one of millions of examples of real people being hurt by Obamacare. I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Guam seek recognition? The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in solidarity with the people of the Philippines in the wake of the devastation caused by Super Typhoon Haiyan. I just returned yesterday from my district, Guam, where we have a large Filipino population trying to reach relatives, all to no avail. Remember that we are the closest neighbors to the Philippines. The images that we see on TV are horrific and unimaginable. We are strong allies with the Philippines and have deep historic and cultural ties. As we have done in the past, we will stand by our allies in need, and I commend the Obama administration for rushing to the aid of the Filipino people. And also I commend the efforts of the Filipino community of Guam, the government of Guam, and the local nonprofits and businesses for mobilizing to provide resources to their counterparts. Like Operation Tomodachi, we are rushing to the aid of the Philippines. This is how we demonstrate our commitment to the Pacific partners. I appreciate and commend the efforts of our federal government to send significant resources to the impacted areas of the Philippines, and I urge this Congress to reaffirm this commitment to the Philippines and to support providing resources necessary to help them recover.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my
Without
remarks.
objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Obamacare has been nothing short of a painful government illness. On the first day Americans were due to enroll in their health care plan, they just couldn't do it. Errors flashed across the computer screens. It was a glitch here, a glitch there, everywhere a glitch, glitch, glitch. Out of the 500,000 Americans that should have been enrolled by now, only a handful were able to sign up thanks to technical incompetence, negligence, and those glitches. Americans will be penalized if they can't sign up, but how are they supposed to sign up when the website doesn't work? Computer glitches should take minutes to fix, not weeks. These glitches are just a sign of things to come when the government takes over America's health. If the government can't even get the website right, how will government get health care right for the American people? Obamacare has the compassion of the IRS, the competence of FEMA, and the efficiency of the Post Office. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from the Northern Marianas Islands seek recognition?
Speaker, I rise to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the people of the Northern Mariana Islands know the terror when a typhoon strikes. We know how difficult are the days and months of recovery after, but none of us has known a storm with the power and intensity of Typhoon Yolanda. So our hearts and our prayers go out to the people of the Philippines who are suffering through this terrible tragedy that swept down upon them. We have families and friends there. Some, thank God, we know are safe. The fate of others we wait to learn, and whether their homes are standing, whether they have food, water. All we know for certain is that the people of the Philippines need our help, and America is rising quickly to assist. Our government immediately committed $20 million. Disaster teams are on the way. Much more will be needed from our government and from individuals alike. But I'm sure we will all do whatever we can to assist the survivors who have lost so much and now face the long task of rebuilding their homes and lives. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend
Without
my
objection,
remarks.
the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, the National Park Service released a draft general management plan for the Ozark National Scenic Riverways in Missouri's 8th Congressional District. The general management plan seeks to limit my constituents' access to the rivers that they have enjoyed for generations. This plan from the Park Service would shut down public access points to the rivers. It would eliminate motorized boat traffic from certain areas, further restrict boat and motor horsepower in other areas, close several gravel bars, and propose additional areas to be designated as federal wilderness. The outcry I've heard from my constituents is unanimous. They believe the Ozark National Scenic Riverways are already overmanaged and overburdening my constituents, and they do not want the National Park Service to further intrude on their access to their public rivers. Mr. Speaker, I urge the Park Service to reject changing management practices on the Ozark National Scenic Riverways so that my constituents can continue enjoying their rivers.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to
Without objection, so ordered. The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my Republican colleagues are still obsessed with ending health care for the American citizens. I come here today to tell you while the administration, experts, and my colleagues in Congress are working on making sure that all Americans have insurance. I say to you, while they talk about glitches, yes, we're all disappointed with that. When they talk about the face of the stories, let me tell you, last week during our week at home, I held a town hall conference, and many of my constituents called in and asked questions about the Affordable Care Act. You know why? Because they had a college student who can stay on their insurance. You know why? Because there were women who had pre-existing conditions now that can be covered. You know why? They were seniors, they were mothers, they were parents. And that's what the Affordable Care Act is about. So I say to you, listen closely, America, because the Affordable Care Act will make a difference, and that's what we should have in this wonderful America that we live in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, since the Affordable Care Act was first introduced, President Obama claimed time and time again, if you like your insurance, you can keep it. Yet over the last 6 weeks, I've heard from numerous constituents across western North Carolina that in fact, was not what they were experiencing, that unfortunately they had canceled policies because of Obamacare. Steve, a pastor in Hickory, received notice his plan with a premium of $695 is being canceled. His new plan's premium, $1,500. Marcia in Claremont had her current plan canceled. The replacement plan was 133% more in cost. Milton, a retiree from Denver, had his policy canceled. The replacement not only has higher deductibles and co-pays, but it also precludes him from seeing his current doctor. I heard from Terry, a self-employed woman in Newton, whose premiums were $359 a month until Obamacare canceled these plans, and her new premium is $759 a month. I asked my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join with us in passing the Keep Your Health Care Plan to hold the President to his word that if you like your plan, you can keep it.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize November as National Alzheimer's Disease Awareness Month. Over 5 million Americans nationwide are living with Alzheimer's. It's a disease who afflicts the victim, but also the family, a disease whose origins are unknown, but whose end is absolutely certain. It's a disease that takes your mind, your dignity, and eventually your life. In 2013, Alzheimer's will cost the nation $203 billion. This number is expected to rise to $1.2 trillion by 2015. Mr. Speaker, I commend the work of the Western New York Alzheimer's Association local advocate Nancy Swiston, who worked so hard this month and year-round to highlight the effects of Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is a public health crisis that can't be ignored. I urge my colleagues to raise awareness about Alzheimer's in their own communities and to support the bipartisan Hope for Alzheimer's Act to improve diagnosis and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. I yield back the balance of my time.
This time, for what purpose does the gentleman from Montana seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and provide some remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to congratulate Vance Homegun, a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes from Arlee, Montana. Vance was recently recognized as a 2013 Center for Native American Youth Champion of Change for his work to preserve the Salish language in his school and his community. I had the opportunity to meet with Vance just last night and learn more about the work he's doing on the Flathead Reservation. Vance was introduced to a Salish language camp by his aunt when he was just 11 years old and has been determined ever since to become a fluent speaker in his tribe's language. He's been working with tribal departments, organizations, and youth groups for the past 6 years to help preserve the Salish language. Vance teaches language classes at high schools and leads an organization that utilizes peer-to-peer methods to teach language and culture. I commend Vance for his commitment to preserving and increasing awareness of this important part of his tribe's culture and history, and I congratulate him on this well-deserved award. Vance Homegun, well done. Thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Hampshire seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my
Without
remarks.
objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite my significant frustration with the rollout of the Affordable Care Act, I remain committed to increasing access to affordable health care for every Granite Stater. To that end, I support efforts to ensure that folks who like their current health plan can keep them for another year. In New Hampshire, Granite Staters already have the option of renewing their current plans, and I believe that families across the country should be able to do the same, and I will support good faith efforts to do that. But the Affordable Care Act is not a perfect law, and I'm committed to improving it. Make no mistake. We cannot go back to the days when insurance companies were free to deny insurance coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, or simply because they were female and their rates would be higher, or to drop people from their plans because they got sick, or to drop people from their plans because they grew older and were not living in their own home with the family. I will continue to work with anybody who is serious about making this law work and to ensure that Granite Staters have access to the quality, affordable health care that they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I got a letter from someone in my district. It says, you have probably heard about health care reform and wondered what it means to you. This letter is to let you know that your My Choice health insurance plan from Blue Cross Choice Health Plan is non-grandfathered. This means you purchased it or made significant changes to it after March 23, 2010, the day the Affordable Care Act became law. As a result, law requires that your insurance plan expire. This is not the saddest part of this letter, the fact that this woman was made a promise that no one is keeping to her. The saddest part of this letter, she asked me not to use her name here today. Someone does need to be held accountable for making promises to citizens that are not kept. But beyond that, someone needs to be held accountable for allowing an environment to grow up where citizens of this country are afraid to have their name spoken on the floor of this House for fear of retribution from their government. We'll deal with health care. We'll do the very best that we can. But beyond that, we need to figure out a way to create an environment where people are free to speak their minds on issues such as this. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following one of the worst natural disasters to hit landfall, we stand as a world community in support of the people of the Philippines. Last week, Typhoon Yolanda tore through the Philippines, tragically taking thousands of lives and leaving millions without food, water, or shelter. The road ahead will be difficult, but the resilient spirit of the Filipino community, far and near, will overcome this challenge. As a representative of one of the largest Filipino communities in the United States, my heart goes out to the families in my communities whose loved ones suffered through this dreadful storm. My office is working to connect families with the State Department to help them locate and get news about their loved ones. I'm pleased by the significant humanitarian efforts from both my home district and around the world. We are a nation founded and guided by the principles of humanity. We must not forget our brothers and sisters in the Philippines, for far too many are still without food, water, and shelter. If the infrastructure is down, come on. Let's start thinking outside of the box and do everything in our power to provide food and water and critical support today. Thank you.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the achievements of the Rhode Island Nurses Institute Middle College Charter High School, the first middle college established in Rhode Island and the first American charter school that is dedicated to the nursing profession. My grandmother, Lucy Cicilline, was a proud nurse at St. Joseph's Hospital for many years. As a four-year program, this institution helps to bridge the gap between high school and college, providing students who have graduated in ninth grade with an innovative learning experience that allows them to graduate with a high school diploma and nursing credentials so they can enter the workforce successfully. The Rhode Island Nurses Institute Middle College Charter High School first opened its doors 2 years ago and today provides a quality education for 272 young people from my home state of Rhode Island.
If we're serious about getting our economy back on the right track, we need to find new, innovative ways to make sure that young people have the opportunity to go to college or begin their careers equipped with the skills they need to compete in a global economy. The Nursing Institute Middle College is showing us one way to achieve this goal. I want to applaud the work of Chief Executive Officer Pamela McHugh, their entire faculty, staff, and all of the students. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1
Without
minute.
objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, opponents of the Affordable Care Act in Congress have spent the past few weeks reveling in the problems of the Federal Exchange website, healthcare.gov. In my state of Kentucky, where we have created our own exchange, we've had tremendous success. As of last week, nearly 415,000 people had explored the website and assessed their options. More than 42,000 are now enrolled in health plans, many of them for the first time. And 843 small businesses have begun applying for coverage for their employees, with 309 of them already able to offer coverage to their workers. We are 6 weeks into a 6-month open enrollment period, and while the failures of the federal health care website are frustrating, they are far from fatal. The true danger to the more than 42,000 Kentuckians who have gained coverage under the law, and the hundreds of thousands more who will, is what opponents of the law are proposing in its place, a return to the broken system that failed tens of millions of Americans each year. Mr. Speaker, I encourage my colleagues and the American people to keep a healthy perspective. We did not enact the Affordable Care Act to launch a website. We did it to ensure that every American has access to affordable quality care, and we should all work together to accomplish that goal. I yield
Gentleman's
back.
time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Hawaii seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I join my colleagues from California, Guam, and CNMI in expressing our support for those devastated by Superstorm Typhoon Yolanda or Haiyan. We do know that the United States has already committed $20 million, and the PACOM has mobilized. The UN has estimated that it may probably cost $300+ million to send aid to the Philippines. We know that our military has shown that its humanitarian and disaster relief capabilities are bar none, and they show that in March 11, 2011, when the Tohoku earthquake hit Japan. Mr. Speaker, members of Congress must stand ready to support the efforts to aid the people in the Philippines. Hawaii's Filipino community is the largest minority that we have, and many have relatives from the area. Typhoon Haiyan ripped through Visayan area, which is where our first immigrants came from. We need to show the world, Mr. Speaker, that the United States is again the great nation that it is, because it does not turn its back on people in need. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the relationship between the United States and Pakistan has been a long and mutually beneficial relationship in general. But I rise today based on the representations of many of my constituents to raise concerns about the status of religious minorities. I support a strong U.S.-Pakistan relationship and have experienced kindness, generosity from the Pakistani people myself and their beautiful diversity. In addition to Pakistan's Sunni Muslim majority, there are Shia Muslims, Ahmadi Muslims, Christians, Hindus, and others. Pakistan is a country with rich religious diversity. However, the situation for many religious minorities is of grave concern. And this is particularly true for Shia Muslims, although all have expressed concern. Shias face daily discrimination at work, school, and the political process. According to the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, more than 500 people were killed last year in sectarian attacks against Muslim sects, mainly Shia. This year, nearly 3 Shias have been killed every single day. 3 people have been killed simply because of how they practice their faith. Mr. Speaker, this is a crisis and something must be done, and I urge the people of Pakistan and their leadership to do something about it now.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Request consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the importance of the Special Diabetes Program, which represents 35% of the federal investment in type 1 diabetes research, and to encourage my colleagues to support a multi-year renewal of the program at current funding levels. Type 1 diabetes among Americans under the age of 20 rose by 23% between 2001 and 2009. People with type 1 diabetes, including one of my constituents, 8-year-old Charlie, need daily finger sticks and insulin injections to stay alive. As part of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation's Promise to Remember Me campaign, I recently met with Charlie and his father and another constituent, Nancy, whose 17-year-old daughter also has type 1 diabetes, to discuss their daily struggle with the disease and their hopes for better treatment options and someday a cure. The Special Diabetes Program has delivered groundbreaking research for type 1 diabetes, including artificial pancreas systems, a revolutionary technology in the research pipeline that will automatically control blood sugar levels, keep patients healthier, and help avoid many dangerous and costly long-term complications due to diabetes. Mr. Speaker, I urge support of the program, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 403 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 72, House Resolution 403. Resolved, that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 2655 to amend Rule 11 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure to improve attorney accountability and for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and on any amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 2. At any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 982 to amend Title 11 of the United States Code to require the public disclosure by trust established under Section 524G of such title of quarterly reports that contain detailed information regarding the receipt and disposition of claims for injuries based upon exposure to asbestos and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. No amendment to the bill shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except 1 motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for the purpose of debate only, I'd like to yield 30 minutes to my friend from Florida, Mr. Hastings, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I also ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I think back to a time when I was a teenager and I came into the gallery, and I'm convinced that I came in during a rule because the reading clerk was standing there reading line after line after line of material I didn't understand at all. And I thought, why in the world is line by line by line of legislation being read? Haven't the members already looked at that legislation? Haven't they already had time to study it? And what I know now, Mr. Speaker, 3 years with the voting card of the people of the 7th District of Georgia, is that the rule is the only piece of legislation, this entire body, that has to be read word for word here on the floor of the House. My colleague from Florida and I spend a lot of hours up there in the Rules Committee sorting things out, but the rules matter. The process matters. And I will be able to confess to you, Mr. Speaker, I think sometimes we get that process done a little better. Sometimes we get that process not done quite so well. But today we have a rule that brings two pieces of legislation to the floor, two very important pieces of legislation to the floor. This structured rule provides for H.R. 982, which is the Further Asbestos Claim Transparency Act, the FACT Act. And it brings a closed rule for H.R. 2655, the Lawsuit Abuse Reduction Act of 2013. Now, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, I was just talking with a group about what the Rules Committee does, and I talked about the importance of an open process and how closed rules don't give folks as much opportunity to express their views on the floor. It is going to be a closed rule on the Lawsuit Abuse Reduction Act, H.R. 2655, because for 11 days, Mr. Speaker, the Rules Committee solicited amendments from the entire body. Ask anyone who had any ideas about how it is to improve this legislation to submit those amendments so that we could consider them in the Rules Committee. And over that period of 11 days, Mr. Speaker, not one member of this body offered any ideas about how to improve this bill. We would have liked to have made amendments available and in order for this bill, but none were submitted. So while we say this is a closed rule on H.R. 2655, it's only because no amendments were submitted to improve upon it. Now, on H.R. 982, the FACT Act, Mr. Speaker, we had 5 amendments submitted. 5 amendments, all Democrat amendments. One was withdrawn. So there were only 4 that were in order for our meeting last night. One was confessed to actually just try to eliminate the effectiveness of the bill altogether. And so we excluded that one because if folks don't like the bill, they can just vote no. They don't have to destroy the bill from within. They can just vote no on final passage. But all of the other amendments that were submitted, we made in order. Now, these are not amendments that I intend to support on the floor, Mr. Speaker, but I do think it's important that people's voice be heard. So again, 3 amendments are made in order. That's 75% of all the amendments that were submitted, and they're all amendments offered by my friends on the Democrat side of the aisle. The Rules Committee thought it was important to make those amendments in order. Now, we'll talk a lot, Mr. Speaker, in the debate that comes after the rule about the content of these bills. One deals with frivolous litigation and whether or not judges will be required to allow folks for whom who had to defend against frivolous lawsuits to recover the costs of those suits. Today, Mr. Speaker, if someone files a frivolous lawsuit against you, you can have that lawsuit tossed out, but you've got to go back to the court a second time to recover all of the costs that it took you to have the frivolous lawsuit tossed out. It's a tremendous burden on small businesses in our nation. This bill seeks to solve that. And the FACT Act, our Asbestos Litigation Act, aims to provide some transparency to the asbestos trust funds. I don't know if you're familiar, Mr. Speaker, but when it was discovered, all of the health damage done by asbestos, the lawsuits began immediately. And would have driven every one of those companies that either used asbestos or produced asbestos into bankruptcy, leaving no money at all for victims who had health problems that they then sought compensation for. So federally, we created within federal bankruptcy courts these asbestos trust funds that allowed these companies, these manufacturers of asbestos, these folks who utilized processes that included asbestos, to deposit money into a trust fund and not go out of business, but provide certainty that victims would be able to recover from those funds in the future. There is some concern, Mr. Speaker, that the process as it exists today does not allow for folks to see who is getting those dollars and whether or not the victims who have the most urgent needs are receiving those dollars first. Our great concern, Mr. Speaker, is that when those trust funds are depleted, they're gone forever. As you know, asbestos-related illnesses often don't present themselves for years down the road, so we have a stewardship obligation to these trust funds to keep them protected for future claimants. This bill requires a degree of transparency a quarterly report from the trustees of these trust funds to see who is making claims on these funds, who's receiving claims out of these funds, again, just so we can be good stewards of those trust funds and ensure that they're available for future years. I don't sit on the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Speaker, but I heard from the ranking member of the Constitution Subcommittee last night. I heard from the chairman of the full committee last night in the Rules Committee as we held a hearing on both of these bills. And I'm glad that we're able to bring them to the floor today, Mr. Speaker. Two bills, structured rule. One rule is closed because no amendments were provided. The other bill is receiving 75% of all the amendments that were submitted, just one amendment excluded by that rule. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Georgia reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my good friend from Georgia for yielding me the customary 30 minutes. I listened to him, and he was very clear about, one, the process, and two, the basic substance of both measures that are on the floor today. And to a relative degree, I agree with much of what he has said. I know that my friend from Georgia is an advocate of an open process, and in all due respect to him and the committee, structured rules, whether members have offered suggestions for change or not, are not open rules. However, in this particular case, he is correct that of the 5 amendments that were offered by members of my party, 3 of them were made in order, and none were offered on the first of the 2 measures. But, Mr. Speaker, with only 15 days left in this session of the 113th Congress, we are here yet again doing more of the same, which is nothing. It has been reported that some among my friends across the aisle have even joked that the House shouldn't be in session in December at all. Instead of addressing our nation's serious immigration needs, and I might add footnote there is a substantial loss to our economic undertakings by virtue of us failing to do the things that we can and should do, either comprehensively or step by step, to deal with the immigration circumstances of this great nation. We could be passing ENDA. The Senate did last week, where we can end discrimination in the workplace. Or we could do something that all of us know needs to be done. We could work on ending sequestration. I was at 2 meetings this morning, one dealing with homelessness and the other dealing with the need for food. And in each instance, the parties that were the experts cited to how sequestration has impacted their nonprofit organizations in trying to assist the homeless and the needy as it pertains to food. So we could be working on trying to stop this Meat Axe approach that is set in motion, yet we find ourselves passing bills that won't do anything and aren't going to go anywhere. H.R. 2655, in fact, is, as my colleague pointed out, no member offered any amendment to it. It's so bad that nobody didn't even want to fix it. The bill is nothing more than a partisan solution to a problem that doesn't exist. The American Bar Association, the preeminent bar association among lawyers in every category in the United States of America, wrote the following, quote, "No serious problem has been brought to the Rules Committee's attention. There is a need to reinstate, there's no need to reinstate the 1983 version of Rule 11 that proved contentious and diverted so much time and energy of the bar and the bench." The ABA continued that the bill, quote, is not based on an empirical foundation, and the proposed amendments ignore lessons learned. The proposed changes would, and I quote them, impede the administration of justice by encouraging additional litigation and increasing court costs and delays. This bill not only prevents judges from calling balls and strikes, it forces members of the bench to call balks on every pitch before the ball can even reach the plate. The Judicial Conference, the preeminent conference of the United States courts in this country, this is the body that's responsible for proposing the necessary changes in the federal rules of procedure. They ask federal judges about these proposed changes. 87% of the judges asked prefer the existing Rule 11 to the 1983 version. 85% of them support the safe harbor provisions. 91% oppose mandatory sanctions for every Rule 11 violation. 84% think that attorney's fees should not be awarded for every Rule 11 violation. And here's the big one. 85% believe the amount of groundless litigation has not grown since promulgation of the 1993 rule. These are men and women who face these issues on a daily basis. They know better than most and almost anyone in this House of Representatives and believe that Rule 11 has plenty of teeth as it is. This bill would substitute the judgment of Congress for that of other judges. When the Judicial Conference of the United States opposes the changes in this bill, you would have to wonder who the bill is really benefiting. It's not just the judges who oppose this bill. There's a long list of groups that includes attorneys, consumer protection groups, civil rights organizations, and public interest advocates, all in opposition to this bill. As late as this morning, I received an additional letter from the organization that is the National Employment Lawyers Association, and in sum and substance, they feel that they represent farms, fields, schools, factories, executive offices, military services, hospitals, and many others, and feel that they are a unique voice in this category, and they stand in opposition because they think it will proliferate the amount of litigation that is unnecessary in overburdened courts as it is. The court already has discretion to award sanctions, attorney's fees, and expenses. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 2655 will create more hurdles with deep-pocketed businesses and can drag out litigation that is already too expensive and time-consuming. My friends across the aisle have produced a number of anecdotes in support of this bill, but most of the cases cited are demand letters of state law cases, neither of which are subject to federal rules of civil procedure. Furthermore, lawsuits are too complicated to explain with a quip of carefully selected and characterized facts. Just because a particular fact pattern is entertaining or seemingly silly does not mean the case makes for a good headline, or doesn't mean that real people weren't really injured. The most famous example that I can think of is the woman who sued McDonald's for her coffee being too hot. When you say it like that, it sounds like, you know, you want coffee to be hot when you get it. But what's skipped over when we say it that way is that the coffee caused third-degree burns, and that the lady had to be hospitalized for 8 days, received skin grafts, and then 2 years of medical treatment. Well, that hot coffee doesn't sound so silly when you look at it from that standpoint. Speaking of bills opposed by the people, the supposedly help the second portion of this rule, H.R. 982, the FACT Act, is ironically titled because it was drafted without regard to any of the facts. There is no evidence of systemic fraud or that systemic failures encourage fraud. The GAO, in its study, was unable to identify endemic and overt instances of fraud that would justify these kinds of changes. Most of the information supporters seek is available through the standard discovery process. This bill seriously compromises the privacy of victims in order to provide offenders with litigation shortcuts. Claims of one to increase transparency are really laughable, since the offenders involved in these suits are allowed to maintain their privacy. This bill further victimizes people who have already been through so much. Human error is not fraud. Isolated incidents are troubling, but fraud prevention procedures are already in place and functioning adequately. And asbestos victims oppose this bill. My friends across the aisle would know that if they had provided victims an opportunity, they would have known what they had to say, but they did not provide that opportunity. I asked the chair of this committee last evening whether or not the victims had been afforded an opportunity to make a presentation, and he agreed with me when I pointed out to him that staff had allowed that they could have a private meeting, but they did not have an opportunity to testify during the proceedings. Now, it seems to be a favorite tactic of my Republican friends, and they have done this to asbestos victims, and they've done it to judges. When it came to shutting down the government, they ignored the overwhelming desire of hardworking and working poor Americans. They continue to ignore economists and the downgrading of our credit rating over the debt ceiling. They disregard the science of climate change despite erratic, catastrophic weather patterns and rising sea levels, and I'm sure that all of us recognize the most recent typhoon that has devastated the Philippines, and I am hopeful that we, along with others in the world, will hasten to the rescue. America is always to be commended for our efforts when tragedies strike other nations, and I would call on other nations who have not done so to become adherents of the kind of philosophy that we have, and I hope that we can help those in the Philippines to recover rapidly. If my friends continue to ignore the world as it is in favor of the red-tinted paradise they believe it to be, they'll have no one to blame but themselves when the country decides it's time to ignore them. I wish to say one additional thing regarding the privacy concerns. Yesterday, I called Comcast Television. I wanted to order the Miami Heat were playing the champions of basketball for the last 2 years, were playing last night. So I thought it not robbery that I would order the NBA game last evening. Well, lo and behold, last evening and this morning, before I left to attend meetings, the Comcast system is down and not working. And I was told that I would get a phone call yesterday. And I didn't get any phone calls. So I called this morning and I was told I'll get a phone call today. But I missed the game last night. Incidentally, the Heat won. I did see that in the paper this morning. But I'm concerned about the privacy measures because when I called Comcast, after giving them my account number and after telling them who I was and what my address was, and this is through 3 different automatic systems, then the young man came over the telephone, and when he came over the telephone, after by doing all of this, the account, my name, where I live again, he then asked me for the last 4 digits of my Social Security number. A former colleague of ours who died of mesothelioma, Bruce Vento, whose wife has written actively along with others for us to see how this identity problem might persist if we pursue this course. This bill would make the private information of asbestos poisoning victims readily available on the Internet, and therein lies the difference. Different now, any information that anybody needs is already in the courthouse, and they can go to the courthouse and achieve that information. But this is part of what we mean when we say this bill re-victimizes asbestos victims all over again. If an employer or identity thief wants to get the information in a regular lawsuit, they have to physically now go to every courthouse in the country and look through paper records. But with this bill, if L.C. Hastings applies for a job at X corporation, the manager at X can search for my name on the Internet, learn that I got money from an asbestos trust, and then decide, if he or she wanted to, not to hire me out of some misplaced fear that I'm someone who just goes around suing their employer, or they could refuse to hire me because they fear I'll be sick a lot or drive up their group health insurance. An identity thief could learn the last 4 digits of my Social Security number. That's the same piece of information that I gave to Comcast yesterday, and that my bank and credit card companies use to verify my identity during customer service calls. What part of that do you not understand, that if you put it on the Internet, then anybody can utilize it? Risking employment discrimination and identity theft for asbestos poisoning victims just because my colleagues on the other side want to stick it to the trial lawyers seems awfully crass to me. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume to say to my friend I absolutely share his passion for privacy protection. In fact, I had to leave a hearing we were having in the Government Oversight Committee today, Mr. Speaker, where we were looking at the Obamacare website. And we're talking to the chief information officers and the chief technology officers about how this website had gone live without having been fully vetted for security protections. Talk about how even as we sit here today, we have not fully run through those security processes. And I share the gentleman's concern. I remember the gentleman is an attorney as well. I remember when I was in law school and they gave you access to the LexisNexis database when you showed up to law school. Well, you could dial up anybody in the country. It's giving you a credit report headers. It's showing you Social Security numbers. We really do have to have a national conversation, Mr. Speaker, about where we're headed. Those last 4 digits that were once my private knowledge are out there all over the Internet today. My birthday is broadcast everywhere on the Internet. My mother's maiden name is out there all over the Internet. All of those things that folks used to ask me to protect me have now become part of the public domain. And what the gentleman says about a need to focus on that and protect folks is absolutely right, and we absolutely need to do that. There was only one amendment last night that was offered to deal with privacy. It was going to give a unique identifier to folks instead of listing names so that we could have the transparency to see if folks were trying to game the system and take opportunities away from future victims. That amendment was withdrawn. We didn't have an opportunity to talk about that. But my great hope is that this bill will pass the House today, that we'll be able to have a similar bill come out of the Senate, and if regular order has a chance to prevail on Capitol Hill, conference committees will give us another chance to take a bite at that apple. I think the gentleman brings up very, very real concerns, and again, we'll have an opportunity to talk about those today. The gentleman says, Mr. Speaker, there are some bills that are just so bad nobody wants to fix them. I want to say to the gentleman I'm sympathetic to that sentiment. There are a few that I could rattle off right now that are so bad I wonder if it's even possible to fix them. But the bill the gentleman was talking about was the bill to eliminate frivolous lawsuits. lawsuits, Mr. Speaker. When we had these penalties in place back for 10 years, between 83 and 93, more than 70% of judges said that they utilized this procedure, that they awarded damages in frivolous lawsuits. 70% of judges, Mr. Speaker, utilized this provision that we're trying to bring back into being to punish filers of frivolous lawsuits. This is not a bill for big business, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill that has been key voted by the National Federation of Independent Businesses. If you know NFIB, and I know most of my colleagues do, these are folks, this is the trade association that represents the mom and pop shops, Mr. Speaker. These aren't the big working out of a glass building downtown folks that you think are out to get the consumer. These are our friends and neighbors. These are folks who are employing our sons and daughters. These are folks who create most of the jobs in this country. And they don't key vote a lot of bills, Mr. Speaker. You can go to their website. It's NFIB. You can go to their website and see the number of bills that they key vote. But they've picked this one out. They picked this one out. My colleague from Florida says that some people believe it's so bad it can't be fixed. They've heard from lawyer association after lawyer association after lawyer association who says they don't like it. But we're hearing from the mom and pop shops who can't defend against it. Understand, Mr. Speaker, that today, if a frivolous lawsuit is filed against you, and I don't mean frivolous because I think it's silly. There are lots of those out there. That's going to be a much higher number. I mean frivolous because the judge in the case says it has absolutely no merit on either the facts or the law. When the judge says it has no merit whatsoever, but you've had to pay to defend yourself against it, this bill says the fellow who filed it ought to make you whole. You know, punitive damages are something we often hear about from the trial lawyer bar. This bill doesn't have punitive damages in it. This bill doesn't say, if you try to bankrupt the mom-and-pop company that's down the street from me, we're going to punish you. I think probably it should, but they didn't want to go that far. They said, if you're trying to destroy the mom-and-pop company down the street with a frivolous lawsuit, you have to make them whole. If a judge decides that your case has no merit, not a possibility of merit, but no merit on either the facts or the law, the poor small business owner who's being harassed by that lawsuit should at least have the chance to be made whole at the end of that process. National Federation of Independent Businesses, small mom-and-pop shops, that's who cares about this legislation. Again, folks are going to vote yes, folks are going to vote no, but I think it's important that we say, Mr. Speaker, this is the purview, this is those things that are important. The gentleman from Florida says, hey, there are more important things we could be working on. I happen to agree with him. There really are important things that we need to have on the floor of this House. But if you're the small business owner who's about to lose your entire lifetime of work because someone has filed a frivolous lawsuit against you, I promise you there is no more important bill in your life than the one that's before us today. I also have to say, Mr. Speaker, to my friend who talks about sequester, I think that is an important thing. I happen to be the Rules Committee designee to the Budget Committee, Mr. Speaker. I happen to be the chairman of the Republican Study Committee Budget and Spending Task Force. In fact, we're having a meeting with Maya McGinnis and the Fix the Debt campaign next Monday afternoon to talk about what those options are for dealing with long-term problems. The Budget Committee right now is in conference with the Senate trying to find a way to restore funding to discretionary spending programs that we all believe have been ham-handedly reduced, and instead find savings on which we can agree on those long-term mandatory spending programs that rarely, Mr. Speaker, have an opportunity to see aggressive oversight, see things that can improve them, see things that can preserve their long-term fiscal viability. And I'd say finally, Mr. Speaker, to my friend from Florida, as the designee to the Budget Committee, as the chairman of the Budget and Spending Task Force, I would say I don't believe it's failure to raise the debt ceiling that threatens America's credit rating. I think it's out-of-control spending that threatens America's credit rating. It only takes a stroke of a pen here for us to raise the credit limit to infinity, Mr. Speaker. But I promise you that's not in the best interests of the American economy. We all know we have spending challenges in this country. We all know that we've made promises to veterans, to seniors, to the infirm, to the poor, that we don't have the money to keep. I think that's immoral. If you don't want to help somebody, then say you don't want to help somebody, but do not promise someone that you will be there for them in their time of need and pull the rug out from under them when they need the promise to be fulfilled the most. We can do better. This body has done better. 1983, Republicans and Democrats came together, extended the fiscal lifetime of Social Security by not doing things that hurt seniors in that day, but doing things that raised the retirement age for me, I was 13 at the time, raised the retirement age for me from 65 to 67. Well, that's a pretty modest step that made a big impact in the life of the Social Security Trust Fund. There are big issues that we need to discuss here on the floor. I hope we will bring those issues to the floor. Our committees in the House have been moving things in a responsible way, step by step, throughout the summer. We could use a little partnership from the other side of the Hill, but I hope we'll focus on what we have before us here today, Mr. Speaker, an opportunity to make a difference for future victims who are applying to the trust fund, and an opportunity to make a difference today for small businesses who are being victimized by frivolous litigation. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Georgia reserves. The chair will remind all persons in the gallery that they are here as guests of the House and that any manifestations of approval or disapproval of proceedings is in violation of the rules of the House. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.